And years later, I heard him telling the story of how he burned his shirt on purpose. He was telling the story right in front of me, but not to me, if that makes sense. And he said he burned his shirt on purpose so that I would do the ironing for the entire relationship.
Narcissists and other toxic people are masterful at using passive-aggressive techniques to keep victims off kilter and feeling at fault. In this episode, Lisa Sonni joins me to talk about various tactics and techniques that are used against victims and how to recognize them. And the self-help tip is how to use your feelings as an indicator of a problem. I recently saw a video about playing dumb, habitually playing dumb as a passive-aggressive tactic. Really, which intrigued me because I know that there are passive aggressive things that people do, particularly like covert narcissists love to do. They're very good at that. But I had never really considered playing dumb one of them. But even the fact that there are so many tactics that we often don't know are actually manipulation that look so innocent that really can hook us and be very toxic. So have you experienced this?
I absolutely have. Playing dumb was something that was really, really affected my relationship in a huge way. And I think that the primary way was that he would play dumb in anything that I explained or expressed. He was just constantly like, I don't understand. I don't understand why you feel that way. I don't understand why you're saying that. I don't understand why you're doing that. That really just shattered my sense of self. How could this person who I love, who I've chosen to be with, who knows me so well, not understand anything I'm saying? What's wrong with me? Am I not communicating this well? Am I not making sense? Is it me? And I think that was a huge point, but I bought into this playing dumb so much. But really, it's feigned ignorance, right? He's not stupid. He doesn't not know. He did understand.
Yeah, it really has a way of tapping into some of your unconscious insecurities. And one of mine was because I heard early on that I talk too much. Now, I don't really think I actually am a big talker. I'm actually, if anything, lately. You don't know the old me, Lisa. If you'd met me back before all this happened, you would have found that I actually said very little. I was pretty quiet most of the time because I didn't want to be seen as a talker. But what would happen, it would activate this fear of mine, and I would become tongue-tied and start to stutter and get clumsy with words and, I'd literally become a mess. It would shake me into incompetence so I couldn't even string words together. But it's amazing how there's these tactics that do that look so innocuous. And yet they're actually a really great way to get you. Here's another one that my sister used to pull this back on me when we were getting ready for school in the morning. She would delay. She would deliberately be super slow and just dilly-dally around, making us late for school, which would raise my anxiety because she knew I was perfectionist and I couldn't stand that. That would drive me nuts. So she would actually, on purpose, ratchet up my anxiety as a way to get even with me. But it's hard to say to someone, speed up, come on, speed up, or you're doing this you're just doing this to piss me off. They're like, well, no, I literally, I dropped this and I had to pick this up, or I can't make this go faster. I mean, they always have such a great excuse that it makes it very hard to say anything because you effectively look like you're being unreasonable.
So sneaky. When I look back to being in this relationship, passive aggressiveness was a much bigger problem than I ever realized because I would actually describe him as a very direct person generally. But when I really think about it, it was not towards me. And I think that was very controlled. That was very on purpose. One thing that I experienced that was so passive aggressive was not understanding domestic labor, pretending that he just didn't understand, or pretending that just it was so easy that I don't understand what the problem is. Just it's dishes, so easy. But just even the idea of weaponized incompetence, that's so passive aggressive to pretend that you don't know how. And early on when we were dating, maybe 6 weeks or less, we had somewhere to go. I forget, maybe it was a wedding, something that required dressing up. And we didn't live together, and he had a white dress shirt. And he said, I just need to iron my shirt. I'm not good at ironing though. And I did not take the opportunity to offer to do it for him, but he did. And he burned it.
I knew
he burned the shirt. He burned an iron mark in it. So if he wore a different shirt, which I ironed for him, and years later, I heard him telling the story of how he burned his shirt on purpose. He was telling the story right in front of me, but not to me, if that makes sense. And he said he burned his shirt on purpose so that I would do the ironing for the entire relationship. And man, that worked. But it was I pretend, and I don't know. I don't understand how to iron. And of course you do. Of course you do. Of course you understand that a hot thing on fabric would burn it. I know you know that. Now I know. It was so passive aggressive and I bought into it.
Yeah. Let's stop for a moment and talk what that is, because you're also I thought of a great example how it happened to me that showed he knew what he was doing, because he said that. But before I get into it, let's define passive aggressive. So there are 4 different types of communication styles. The best type is called assertive, and that is where you just state what you want directly and in a hearable way that's respectful of yourself and respectful of another person. So if I said, "Hey, Lisa, are you available today to do this podcast?" and you say, "Yes, I am," that would be an assertive conversation. There's no subtext. We're speaking clearly about what we want, and the intention is clear. Aggressive would be assaultive, where I would attack you and on purpose to harm you. The intent is to be harmful. And again, there's usually no subtext. We know when someone, name calling is a great example of aggressive communication. Then there's passive communication, which is non-committal. That's when you say to somebody, "Where do you want to go for dinner?" You're like, "I don't care." And they literally are like, there's no direction. They didn't respond back to you, and you don't know, and that kind of throws the ball back to you. Passive aggressive looks passive, but the intent is to harm you or affect you. So what I thought of a great example that happened to me is mine rarely ever raised his voice, but there was an incident where he actually did it. He called me out in front of it was at a restaurant. He stood over me at a restaurant and said to me, "You just have to accept that you're an overweight, middle-aged woman," he said in front of everybody. And that's the most violent he ever got with what he said. But it was hurtful because it was public, and he was shaming me, and I was very upset already about something else, and he stormed off. So when I went back and finally found him and continued the conversation with him, he started to interrupt me. And so I said, "You're to stop talking. I want you to listen to what I say." And when I said that, I knew what he would do next. What he typically would do was take whatever I said and then apply it universally in an extreme manner, all or nothing, so that then he'd never say anything. So if I stopped and paused and asked for a rebuttal, he wouldn't say anything because he'd say, "Well, you told me I'm not to talk. I'm just doing what you said." It was intending to hurt me. He's intending to opt out of the conversation to frustrate me. So sure enough, when I got done doing my spiel of whatever it was, I looked at him at the end and I said, "And you're now not to say that you can't talk because I told you a few minutes ago not to talk. You're not to do that." And he looked at me and said, "Good for you."
Wow.
Yep. He admitted that he knew he'd been doing that, and he knew it really upset me, and that he was sort of like a little astonished that I caught him and called him on it before he even pulled it.
And basically praised you for calling him out. It was like, "Oh, you saw that, did you? You see my game. Good for you. 2 points for Kerry."
That's right.
So passive
I know,
aggressive.
exactly.
Oh my God.
Exactly.
That's horrible. That's absolutely. Playing the victim is another passive aggressive thing that narcissists are known for playing passive or playing the victim rather. And, everything sort of shifts. You see the tactic of Darvo. Gaslighting is a game in and of itself of being passive aggressive, but Darvo specifically, right? Switching it. I can't believe you would think that of me, and switch it into now they're the victim. That's so passive aggressive. They're not saying what they mean. They're just a perpetual victim. I can't stand it.
Oh, I know. And they can even do that on things that actually make no sense. They'll pull that out and throw it up. And then it's very hard to combat that, because it happened to me when I was he was telling me about a therapy session, and I asked him about how it made him feel, and I had seen that before. And then he looked at me and goes, "I can't believe you said that." I'm thinking, I'm empathizing. What did I say? I can't believe you said that. And I literally it shut the conversation. Where do you go? There's nowhere to go. It's so effective. So yeah, it's these mechanisms are so toxic because they're extremely difficult to see. And then when you do see them, there's almost no way to really call them out, because then the next thing they do, they use the next passive aggressive move, which is claim ignorance. "I don't know what you're talking about. How is that a hurtful statement? I didn't mean to hurt you by saying it." So they literally they get you into a box when they do these things, which is so maddening when you're really trying to just have a conversation with somebody or trying to work something out with somebody.
Absolutely. Or when they play silent treatment, right? All of a sudden,
yes,
it's like, "You hurt me. I can't deal. I'm so hurt that I'm going to go over here and I just can't be around you right now." They're unwilling to help solve anything. They're unwilling to communicate, and they just silent treatment. However, if you withdraw from an argument, they flip that on you and say that you're stonewalling them when that's also not what's happening. It's just this maddening, circular, frustrating, horrible game, the worst game you've ever played.
Oh, I know. It is always a lose. You will always come out as the loser on it. So what did you do when that started to happen? What did you do to stop losing?
Oh, I left eventually, but when I was still in it, I just kept losing. In all honesty, I didn't recognize it at all. And I would scream and fight, and then I would get so frustrated. And interestingly, and I guess off topic, but how those arguments would usually end was me just lying, and then him being like, okay, I'm done with this conversation. What do you want to watch on TV? It would always be something really like, I'm done with the argument now. Like, I'm calm. So how do we move on? And I don't even know how to do that. I'm so riled up. I'm so anxious, so upset. I don't understand the switch. But I also feel like that was a bit of a game too, right? Just like, how mad can I make you? And then like, okay, done. Now let's watch TV, because he got what he wanted, which was to hurt me or to upset me. The truth is that what I did to get out of that cycle was leave, but I had to learn that it was a game. And I think that what I see is people get offended to a degree of me even calling it a game, because this is our life we're talking about here, right? And often there's children involved or marriages involved, family, but it's a game to them. So I'm not saying that your life is a game to you, but to them it is, and they treat it as such. So the only way to win the game is to not play the game. So you just don't allow yourself to get sucked into these crazy making conversations. And you know that you're in one when you feel just riddled with anxiety. You're completely stressed out. Your heart is racing. You feel angry, overwhelmed, perhaps speechless, or you're screaming and arguing, you're shouting, or you completely shut down. I know everybody has different reactions to this, but when you start to feel these things, you're in a no-win conversation. There's no way out of this other than just forget it. So I tell people to use the Jade method all the time and just stop.
Yeah. I want to circle back to that in a second, but yeah, because the way mine would often end is he would say, you know what, you're just creating a storm in a teacup. Or another thing you would say is, so you're going to let this ruin the day? You're going to let your mood ruin the day?
That was huge. Everything. So now the day is ruined. Mm-hmm. So now it's ruined. I might as well be at work. I might as well go. And Austin, in fact, would use that as an opportunity, right? You know what? I'm just going to go to work early then, whatever. And that would ruin the day. And it was me being like, damn it, why did I bring this up? Because we only had like 6 hours to hang out before we had to go to work. Now that's gone because I had to go and argue. It took me a long time to be like, you know what? I didn't start this. He started it. I'm not going to feel that. But I still did feel a bit bad.
Yeah. I think when it's small, passive aggressive stuff, like I'm thinking back to my sister just being a slowpoke on purpose, just to tick me off, just to see if she can rile me up, that the solution would have been just to go to school without her, not care if she's late and Sherry may have already missed the bus and I may be her only way in, but that's kind of on her. She made that choice. Now, there's a way in which my behavior that could get really aggressive if I just quickly pulled that off without warning. So I think it was a fair thing when someone says that to say, listen, this is really important to me. I want you to know that at this time, this is the time I'm leaving. If you're not able to make it, I understand that, but I am going to leave at this time so that they're warned and then they have a chance to do something differently. I think about even the weaponized incompetence. My kids pulled that one on me all the time. They just would simply, I can't figure out how to clean the toilet. And so my solution was, because it needed to be clean, is I would go clean it because I just couldn't deal with it. So I stopped asking them. But what happened though, in a way, you're like, well, in a way they won. No, they didn't win because they didn't learn how to clean a house. And I then heard when my kids got to college and they had to clean their own dorm room that there was nobody there to teach them. So they had to go Google how to clean a toilet, which you kind of look a little stupid having a YouTube video playing, trying to teach yourself what instruments you need to have or implements you need to have in order to clean a toilet. So I just like, okay, you don't want to learn? I'm not teaching you. Good luck with that, and let them fall on their face when it happened. So there are solutions that we could do, but none of them are easy, and they often usually cost us something. For me to drive away and leave my sister feels, I don't like that feeling. And even me picking up all the housework and not expecting anything on my kids, I didn't like that either. Made me kind of mad. But that was my way. I got out of the bind. That was the issue. I got out of the bind. But it's really hard when we're talking about a relationship with an adult that we're trying to live life together and they're putting us in these binds one after another.
Yeah. But these binds work. Their games work. They exploit all of our vulnerabilities. They know that people have a desire for love and validation and connection and attention. They know that. They prey on our empathy, our insecurity, our fear of abandonment. And that's how they get power and control in these relationships. They use all these games to manipulate us.
So how did you recognize that you were being manipulated? I think I would love to know, because it was really hard for me to see it in the beginning, because it looks so passive. It looks so innocent. I just don't know. Well, maybe they really don't know, But when you hear it the 50th time on the same issue, it's a simple issue that anybody can go figure out. Then you're like, oh, maybe this is deliberate. So how did you recognize that this was a game the person was playing with you?
I was already out when I realized so many things. And I think that's somewhat of a unique position, that we had already split up by the time I really realized how purposeful all of this was. When I was in it, I didn't have the language. I didn't know that. I don't know the word manipulation, but I had never thought he is manipulating me. Never, not once in the entire relationship. I thought I could not understand why he didn't get such basic things that made sense to him at work and in other areas of his life. And he didn't act that way with anyone else except me. And weirdly, I believed his story, that I was the reason. I didn't communicate properly. I didn't ask properly. And you hear that a lot. I mean, I think in my mind, I'm using these examples of weaponized incompetence and sort of pretending like I didn't see the garbage. I didn't know it needed to be taken out. You know what made me know the garbage needed to be taken out? Checking. We had a lid, which you open the lid and you look with your eyeballs. That would make me see.
You start to smell it. I mean, there's another one too. It gets too long. You know it. You can't.
There's a list of ways that people know things, and that it's so basic, but it used to make me frustrated. And I have an insanely sarcastic streak, so I would say really like angry, resentful, sarcastic things, which certainly didn't help the situation, obviously. But it would infuriate me that I had to have these arguments, but I never saw it as manipulation. So when I saw it, I was out, and we were still communicating in 9 or 10 months after the relationship. After we split, we were still, situationship, whatever you want to call it. And it was in that time that I started to be like, wait a minute, this isn't making sense. He has to know. How could something be so obvious to him in one area of his life, and the literal same example, but just in our house, suddenly becomes different? I started to realize, like, could this be on purpose? And once I realized it was, I could never see it any other way. And that's why one of the biggest things people hear me say is they already know. We waste so much time trying to convince them, like, you don't see that this is passive aggressive. You don't see that this is weaponized incompetence. You don't see, they see.
Yeah, this is how I knew. Mine started using a really ridiculous example. He knew I was snooping a lot, and he had access to his Google account, which meant that I could see what images he's even downloading. If you could look at the browser history, and I saw he was downloading like these little images of "I miss you, I love you" that he's not sending to me. He's obviously downloading them to text to somebody else. So I mentioned it to him, which dumb me. I should just have used it as, I need to leave this relationship. It's really, really over. But I actually said something to him, and he goes, I don't know, Kerry. You know way more about technology than I do. It was such a ridiculous statement. I just remember looking at it and like, oh, okay. And then moving on, like, you know what? I'm not engaging in this. This is going to go nowhere. But there's something, and I would love to use this as a self-help tip today. There was something you said that I thought was super powerful, and it was that the way it made you feel. And I think that's a really powerful indicator that other people can use as an identifier that this is passive aggressive. So let's get into, what does passive aggressive behavior make the victim feel like? And I heard for you, it made you feel crazy,
resentful, confused, full of rage. It incites rage in me to this day. When I deal with people who are passive aggressive, I cannot stand it. It is such a, I get heated even thinking about people being passive aggressive. I value honest and open communication, and I am that kind of communicator. I always have been. And I think when I look back, I realize that I started to become, I don't think passive aggressive, although certainly I can dish that if I choose to, but I know that I'm doing it, and it's always in response to that. But if you find yourself feeling crazy, angry, resentful, or you start to become passive aggressive, maybe, I mean, we could call it mirroring, but also you're just picking up these traits. You're sort of like, oh yeah, you want to be passive aggressive? Then I can be passive aggressive too. If you feel that, that's a huge indicator that something is wrong in the relationship. There's a communication breakdown. And I'm all for, to a degree, you know, trying to call out the behavior. I think we all need to go through that process and say, you're being passive aggressive and this is what it is. And see what their reaction is. If they're like, no, I'm not, and just immediate denial, that's a problem. If they're like, what is that? Let me consider it. At least it's a better sign. But you're not going to see that in a narcissistic relationship. You'll see deflection and denial.
Exactly. I know for me, my reaction was one of, I felt just like I couldn't make a move, that everything was wrong, that everything I did, said was wrong, and that I started to feel paralyzed. I often would just shut down, and I find myself having an extreme like rage reaction as well, but not rage at anybody, but just rage that felt so helpless. I felt really helpless. And this is a powerful thing. I think people haven't learned to use how they feel as an indication of what's happening to them. But it's a really powerful indicator, because feelings are really actually just like a warning device on your dashboard of your car. It tells you something's going wrong. So when you feel sad, then it means you're losing something, or something's upsetting you. And if you're feeling angry, then that means you're feeling a loss of control, you're feeling hurt or attacked. I mean, if you're feeling anxious, you feel like you're probably feeling out of control, like something bad might happen. So feelings indicate something. So I think that when we start to feel a consistent way, it's really wise for us to say what's happening, which is tough, because then it tells you that something's going wrong, so that then you can say, what do I want to do about this? What are my choices? And what I found is that, like that example of him saying, well, you know better, Kerry, you know more about technology. I just thought, you know what, I'm just not stepping into this. This is just not worth it. So the indication of frustration, me being frustrated with stupid responses, that I just thought, okay, I'm not biting. I'm not getting into this with this person.
But choosing not to get into it is also you sort of shutting down, or might have been perceived as acceptance. And I know that it isn't, but that's how they would see it, certainly. I mean, really, you're talking about trusting instincts. And I know how hard that is. And so do you when you're actually in the relationship, because you don't trust your own instincts. You think, maybe it is the way that I'm communicating. Maybe I did start this argument. Maybe it was me. Maybe I am the problem, because they're so good at convincing you of that. They're so good at that game of flipping it onto you.
Which is why I think the fact that you went out and talked to other people, I don't know if you said that in this podcast episode or the other one, but you getting feedback is really a wise thing, because you're validating, is this upsetting? What would you do if this happened to you? And when you got that puzzled look like, I don't know, why is that happening that way? Then you knew you weren't the variable. You knew that this dynamic was the issue, not yourself.
That
so I think that's another
helped
piece
me in a huge way, more than I think I even realized. That it helped me maintain somewhat of a sense of self. Like there was always, you hear victims say all the time that, I thought I was the narcissist. I never thought that. I didn't know anything about narcissism the entire time I was in the relationship. So I wasn't using that language, but I was never committed to the idea that I was the problem. I definitely wondered if I was contributing. I couldn't understand how I could be so wrong, because I felt right in so many arguments that we had, and not in a like I win the argument kind of way, but just I was like, it can't be me. It can't be. Too many people around me agreed, but most of the time you don't see that. Victims are not asking people around them, but it is very validating to realize that 8 to 10 people who I trust, some of whom would absolutely say to me, actually, yeah, you were definitely wrong there. I'm not talking about some girl group who just blindly follows me, but true friends who would say, no, you started it that time, or they were like, no, this is him 100%. Well, great.
Another good way to test is also to ask yourself, do you have the same scenario happen elsewhere in your life? Is it happening at work? Is it happening in your friendships? Is it happening with other family members? And what happens in those situations? And then does it go well or doesn't go well? That's why I knew I wasn't the problem either, is because I had been doing counseling all these years, and I had had a decent first marriage, and I'd raised kids who were doing well, and all of that was going great. And this has not been a problem before. And if it was a problem with me, it would have been a problem everywhere all the time. So I think that's another really great way to validate, where is it coming from? Is it just in this relationship, or is it something you're struggling with universally?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would love to jump Yeah, I would love to jump over to the podcast extra and talk about something we brought up, but we didn't pursue, and that is how to begin to emotionally detach. So when you realize you're in a relationship with somebody who's deliberately trying to ramp you up and to make you the issue, how do you then disengage? So we're gonna hop over there and talk about that. But thank you so much for talking with me about this topic, because it really does get under our skin so effectively.
Yeah.
Well, that's a wrap for this week's episode. Are you following me on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube? Find me at Kerry McAvoy, Ph.D. Now you don't need to wait a week to get your next podcast fix. Join Breaking Free from Narc Abuse at Substack.com to get exclusive audio content for subscribers. To sign up, click the link in the show notes. And whether you're in, consider leaving, or have left a narcissistic relationship, find community support at my Toxic Free Relationship Club. You can learn about this resource as well as others at kerrymcavoyphd.com. And I'll see you back here next week.